What's up, everybody? Welcome to the videos for my core plays for week 10 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. If you enjoy, make sure you have a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, if you like what you see on the screen behind me, it's all available completely free for a week over my Patreon. You can find that link down below in the description or the pinned comment. We've got projections for both sites, DraftKings and FanDuel, my cheat sheet going over cash games tournaments, Discord community that is always a fun place to be in 24/7, and all just the data that I look at every single week to help me make the best lineup decisions. And I do cover the NBA in a similar fashion every single day if you are interested. So again, if you want to check it out, links down in the description or the pinned comment. It's completely free for a week, and if you like it, you can stay. If not, tell me to kick rocks. I don't care either way, but let's get into it. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position because this is the foundational piece to our lineup, because no matter who we pick, it puts us in a certain direction that we have to go with the rest of our build. Because if I go with Joe Burrow, the way I build for single entry / 3 entry max or whatever it may be, even 20 max, all the same rules apply. But I tend to hand build these instead of using an optimizer. So I make sure I follow a certain set of rules. And it's pretty simple. I just want 2 pass catchers with my quarterback, and then I would like to get a run back option. It is not a necessity, but it is something I tend to do way more often than not. So if I go Joe Burrow, that means I'm looking at Jamar Chase. It would have been T. Higgins, but unfortunately he's dead to us this week. So Tyler Boyd, Trent Irwin is also an available option. Then we look for a run back option, which Nico Collins would have been a choice that I would have liked. But he's going to be out this week as well. So Tank Dell, but same applies for everybody else. Jared Goff, we're looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown. Same Laporta running back with a guy like Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnson, Austin Eckler. I don't care, but all the same rules apply with no matter what quarterback you go with. And that's going to solidify several spots in your lineup. So instead of making it too hard on yourself, because there's so many options every single week, just with the quarterback that you pick, it puts you in a certain direction that'll fill out a decent chunk of your lineup to make it a little bit more simple for you. Let's dive into it here. The number one option for me this week is Joe Burrow. Justin Herbert is an option that is expensive this weekend, but honestly, I see similar upside with Jared Goff, and he's over $1,000 cheaper, so that's the way I will be going this week. But if you want to play Herbert, be my guest. But I do like Burrow here below $7,000. He's been playing some pretty good football recently, and if that's going to continue here versus the Houston Texans, I want a piece when he's below 7K. Now, unfortunately, we're not going to have T. Higgins, which I know Higgins has not been a major factor in the offense so far this season, but he heated up last week versus the Buffalo Bills, which was great to see. And in season-long formats, I've been trying to buy T. Higgins because I believe in the player, I believe in the talent, and I don't mind the schedule coming up, but I liked him in this spot versus Houston. Unfortunately, with him being out, it does make a small hit to Joe Burrow's upside, especially if Jamar Chase doesn't play. If Jamar Chase is out and we have T. Higgins out, I personally am not going to be on the Joe Burrow train, so it all hinges on Jamar Chase's status, which it sounds like he's going to play, but it still could be a bit up in the air, so I don't want to say anything for certain as of right now. And while the overall numbers on Joe Burrow have not been super impressive this year, only 230 passing yards per game and 6 yards per attempt with a sub 70% completion percentage, I still like what I've seen recently. We have a 26.75 implied team total for the Cincinnati Bengals as well, which is one of the highest on the entire week. It's 6.5 point spread, so it's nothing too dramatic. So as long as we have Jamar Chase, I'm still in on Joe Burrow, but I don't love that we lost T. Higgins. Jared Goff with the Detroit Lions, $6,400. I prefer him at home in the Dome in Detroit, but it's still an indoor venue in LAC, so I'm fine with it either way. But 25 and 3/4 implied team total for the Detroit Lions, 48.5 point over under, and a 3-point spread. This was a 1.5 point spread earlier in the week. Did get to 3 now, but that still projects to be a pretty close game. And on the season, Jared Goff, yardage wise, he's been good. 271 yards per game, 1.5 passing touchdowns, 68% completion percentage, 34 times per game he's throwing the ball. He's one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a stud for fantasy purposes. And we know this offense can put up points, and this Chargers defense is going to bleed points to quarterbacks. They're currently ranking 30th versus the position, meaning they're allowing the third most points per game at 22.6, 313 passing yards, and 1.5 passing touchdowns. This is a great price for Jared Goff, and it's a good game script, and it's a good game environment overall, so I'm in on him this week at that low price point. Geno Smith at $5,800, he has not been someone you love to roster so far this season. If you drafted him in season long, probably not too happy with that output as well. Only 225 passing yards and barely over a passing touchdown, 65% completion percentage, and throwing the ball less than 28 times per game. You're also not getting too much on the ground as well. This season, only 6 rushing yards per game, so it's been a bit rough, but this is the perfect matchup. They're at home, 25 point implied team total, 5.5 point favorites, 44.5 over under, but they are tied with the Chargers, allowing the third most points per game at 22.6, over 2 passing touchdowns, and nearly 270 passing yards. So if there's a week to ever play Geno Smith, it is going to be this one right now. And his stacking options are pretty cheap in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And if you want to run it back, you have options like Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Jahan Dotson, Logan Thomas, even Antonio Gibson if you want to get a little bit weird. But definitely a really nice cheap stack and a great matchup this weekend. And then Brock Purdy at $5,700. My projections love him this week. Now, I'm going to say I'm recording this on Friday, so I don't want to worry about weather too much at this point, but we are projected to have some decent wins in this game. So just keep in mind that is going to affect him a little bit because we do know winds affect the output for the passing game more so than any rain scheduled. So that's a bit of a concern. I think I read around 20 to 30 miles per hour. And the gust, I guess, could be a little bit more. But if we remove that, the price point is great and the matchup is good. $5,700 on one of the better offenses in football. We're getting Deebo Samuel back. We have George Kittle. We have Brandon Ayuk as an absolute stud. He's averaging 250 and 1.5 on the season, over 9 yards per attempt. Not really going to get you too much on the ground, but this is an offense that can definitely put up points. And the Jaguars are currently 28th versus quarterbacks allowing 275 passing yards and nearly 1.5 passing touchdowns on the season. So I currently have Brock Purdy right around 19 points, which below $6,000. That projects very well. And heading over to DraftKings here, we're going to start filling out our lineup. And first off, please don't copy and paste this. If you are stealing out to see on YouTube, you deserve to lose all of your money because you're going to. That is not a winning strategy. I am simply just picking players from each position group that we talk about, throwing them in a lineup as we talk through it, and I'm going to follow the guidelines we talked about earlier in the video. So it's as simple as that. What you can do is use these same techniques and strategies in your own lineups with your own favorite plays each week, and you'll be well on your way to building some really solid lineups. I've taken down single entry tournaments, 3 max tournaments this year, doing the exact same strategy that I'm talking to you guys right now. And I'm not saying it's the only way to do it. I'll never act like I'm the smartest guy in the room. There's always stuff to learn from, but it's just what I've been using and I am comfortable with. But we need a quarterback here, and Joe Burrow will be the most popular option, especially if Jamar Chase is going to be good to go. So let's be slightly different here. It's not like he's going to be unowned or anything, but I do like Jared Goff in this game. So let's roll with the Goffinator and move on to running backs. And to me, it looks like I have a pretty condensed RB pool this week. There's a couple other stragglers that I think are fine plays. And I don't really see myself going out on a limb and playing CMC if I'm hand building. And the optimizer, yes, he'll populate a little bit because he's projected for like 21 points and the next best guy is right around 17. So it's just a big positional advantage for CMC this weekend, but he does come in at a very hefty price point. Good spot versus Jacksonville though, 3-point favorites, and if it is going to be windy, maybe they run the ball just a little bit more. 24.25 implied team total, plus he'll get the dump offs, and his usage is elite. Over 4 targets per game, 17 carries. You're pretty much getting guaranteed 20 plus touches every single week from one of the absolute best players in the league. And on the season, the Jaguars, well, they've been kind of stiff on the ground versus running backs. They are allowing over 7 catches and 50 receiving yards, which is right up CMC's wheelhouse, so I think he's a fine play. But if you're not spending up a running back like me this weekend, you're probably saving some cash. Tony Pollard, while he is still expensive for the production that you've been getting this year, the role is still elite. He's getting around 20 total touches every single week with involvement in the passing game, but this is the absolute perfect game script for Tony Pollard. So for those of you in season long, I just want to say he has like 3 really easy matchups in a row. He gets the Carolina Panthers, and he gets the New York Giants. I forget the third one off the top of my head, but it's some nice sledding here for Tony Pollard. But this is the absolute perfect scenario for him this weekend. So I love him in all formats, cash games, tournaments. He's going to be one of my favorite plays on the slate. That could backfire because he has been pretty inefficient this year compared to what we've seen in the past. But he's facing the Giants offense that is barely going to be able to move the football this week, I believe. I think they have a 11-point implied team total, something like that this week. Well, if you take 28.5 minus 17.5, yeah, that puts you right around 11 points. But a 28.5 implied team total, which is the highest of the week. 17.5 point favorites at home, getting 15 carries per game and over 4 targets, close to a 13% target share. And the Giants on the season, currently allowing 110 rushing yards, over 1 rushing touchdown, and are 23rd versus running backs. The only concern would be is if they get up early and it's all through the air, and maybe they just put in Rico and he gets the bulk of the work in the second half. But assuming that doesn't happen and Tony Pollard just has an average game, I think we can get to 100 yards and get into the end zone. So I do like Pollard a lot at this price point on both DraftKings and FanDuel. Joe Mixon, another guy that I think will be a cash game staple this week, in a pretty similar scenario to Tony Pollard, where there's 6.5 point favorites, not like it's quite 17.5, but he's a home favorite, 20 or 27 point implied team total, 47 point over under in this game. Need to see very similar volume to Tony Pollard, and he's in an offense that can put up points, 16 carries per game, 3.5 targets, 10% target share. He's also been inefficient this year. Both are getting around 60 rushing yards and right around 4 yards per carry. The Houston Texans currently ranked 20th versus running backs, and with T. Higgins out and Jamar Chase a little bit banged up, if he happened to miss, it should be the Joe Mixon show, but I think we're in line for a guaranteed 15 plus touches here with a couple of targets. And I would take that all day at this price point in an offense that should be around the goal line at some point. So we do have some decent touchdown equity. And if you do not have Joe Burrow in your lineups and you think the Bengals are going to put up points, well, it'd make a lot of sense to at least get Joe Mixon in your lineup. Bijan Robinson, $6,000. This guy is frustrating to roster. He's frustrating if you drafted him in season long this year, but he's dirt cheap at $6,000, and we're going to get 10 plus touches. We know that. He's pretty much stuck right around 11 to 14 carries in that range almost every single week. The problem is he is not getting goal line opportunities, and we just saw a quote from Arthur Smith today saying that he loves Tyler Algier around the goal line. It's a great goal line back, and someone commented, which I thought was funny, if you need 1 yard, Tyler Algier will get you 2.3. If you need 10 yards, well, he'll get you 2.3. And we know Bijan's extremely talented. He was drafted like in the top 10 of the actual NFL draft for a reason. The dude's a stud. And he's at 5 yards per carry this season, which is also really good at 14.5% target share, seeing over 4 targets per game and 11 carries. The problem is just the volume isn't consistent, and they don't like him run the goal line. And that's where running backs make their hay. But the matchup's great. The Cardinals allowing the 3rd most points per game in the running back position, over 100 rushing yards per game and 1 rushing touchdown, 28.6 points to be exact. And while we might not get the goal line carries, I just have 1 rushing touchdown this season. If there's ever a chance for Bijan to rip off a long one, it's probably in this spot versus Arizona. So I'm not really sure if he's going to be safe for cash games. I get it if you want to. It's $6,000, but I feel a lot more comfortable with a guy like Joe Mixon. And then Rachaad White here at $5,800. His usage the past 3 games has been pretty good. 16, 18, and 28 fantasy points last week versus the Houston Texans. In those 3 weeks, we've seen 6, 7, 4 targets, 29, 13 carries. And while he's not a super efficient back, 3.6 yards per carry last week, 4.3 versus Buffalo, and 2.6 versus the Atlanta Falcons. I love the targets in the passing game. And the Titans have not been as stiff versus the run this year than they have in seasons past. They're currently ranking 13th versus running backs, nearly 100 rushing yards per game, and over half a rushing touchdown. So I just like the volume here. If we can get a cheap 15, 20 touches, I'll take it. All right, so we got 2 RB slots to fill here. And since we have Jared Goff, that means we're going the Amon-Ra St. Brown route, which he's close to $9,000. So we can pretty much cross CMC off our list here, but I think we should be able to still afford Tony Pollard at $7,300. So I really like this week at that matchup, and that just game script looks perfect for him this weekend. Hopefully we can get in the end zone and get a good Tony Pollard game. I'd love to see him in the century mark yardage-wise this week. And then dropping down, I also like Joe Mixon. I'm not going to go with the Joe Burrow passing attack here. Not to say I won't pick a wide receiver that's cheap like a Tyler Boyd or Trent Irwin in the right situation here for this build. I think it's fine to have a cheap running back and a cheap receiver in that game, especially with the guy like T. Higgins missing. So let's plug in Joe Mixon here, and we have still right around $5,000, which I feel good about after 3 spots. And we'll move on to our pass catchers. And yeah, we have a very long list here, so quite opposite of the running back position. But like I said, we can make this look a lot less scary. So I have Jared Goff for my build. That means I am playing Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, I kind of hate the other pass catching options from the wide receiver position on Detroit. I like Sam Laporta. That's probably the way we're going to go for a double stack. But you could also look at a guy like Josh Reynolds, Jameson Williams as well if you wanted to. And then we need a run back option. Keenan Allen might be a bit tough to fit. I do not have Quentin Johnston here on this list, but he is a fine option. Just because there's not a player listed on this sheet doesn't mean they're not playable this week. It just depends on your build. I just don't want to put every single player because that does you no good. So these are the ones that, like projection-wise, don't look too bad for me. I like the matchups. So I don't want to go individually here and talk about each and every single one, because if they're on here, they're in a good spot, good matchup. I like the volume that they're seeing. A couple talking points I want to go with. Let's go all the way down here to the cheapies. We have Trent Irwin, Noah Brown, and then Jackson Smith. And he's actually had a decent increase in usage the past few weeks. And like I said, it's a great spot versus that Washington Commanders defense. The majority of people are going to be going with guys like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. Then you also have all the Bengals value here, which Tyler Boyd, who I forgot to put on at first, but he is now in. $4,600, he will be popular. Trent Irwin at $3,000 flat with no T. Higgins, he'll be popular. And especially if Jamar Chase is out, I mean, there's just going to be so much ownership on those Bengals guys. That's another way just to get different, especially if you have Geno Smith. And then Noah Brown here, we're not going to have Nico Collins. Now, we do have Robert Woods, and we also have Tank Dell, but Noah Brown, we saw, has big play upside, 27 fantasy points last week, so we're certainly going to be involved in the offense. So we have plenty of cheap options to go with this week. So if you are someone that wants to spend up at running back this week with CMC, it's certainly doable with these cheap options that we have. We also have Marquise Brown, $5,200 with Kyler Murray. He'll be popular in this game versus Atlanta, who has not been good versus wide receivers this season, especially with the volume that he's been seeing. And it should be an upgrade with Kyler Murray under center, hopefully. I know Call of Duty just came out. Trust me, I played like for 4 hours today. It's awesome. I love it. And I'm sure he loves it too. We know he's got a bit of a video game problem. So hopefully he's watching game film instead of playing MW3, but I would not fault him. Either way, Tank Dell, he'll have ownership with Nico Collins being out. We know he's got massive upside as well. Huge game last week, and that's with Nico Collins playing. And then the rest of these guys, it just goes with your stack. For the most part, they're expensive. They're good plays. It just comes down to, hey, do they fit my quarterback stack? Well, if they do, throw them in. If not, well. And filling out our wide receiver spots, I was thinking Amon-Ra St. Brown was closer to $9,000 than he was to $8,000 flat. So $8,200, that's a very pleasant surprise, and it's very easy to fit in. So I would expect pretty heavy ownership on St. Brown this week. But if we plug him in, we still have $4,300 left to work with. I would love to play Keenan Allen as a run back option. Unfortunately, I just don't think that's going to be possible. We're at $3,200 now if we go that route. And while it's doable with the value we have, because we could go cheap defense, we have Trent Irwin, but I'm also playing Sam Laporta in this build, and he is going to be at $5,700. And if we did that, I just don't see that working out. So as much as I like to play Keenan, we're just not going to be able to make that work. So let's just try to find a secondary option here from Los Angeles. And Quentin Johnson at $4,100 fits the build, and we have just around $4,500 left, and we should be able to make that work. And usually this is a very unfortunate position to talk about because there's just so many bad options, but honestly, I like it this week. There's several guys that I think make for some very solid plays. Obviously, with our build, Sam Laporta is going to make the most sense. There's another pass catcher with Jared Goff, and he is heavily involved in this offense. 7.5 targets per game, half a receiving touchdown, and over a 22% target share, 23% market share of the team's air yards, and a 50% weight opportunity share. Plus, we know the Chargers' pass defense has been awful, and they're allowing the 4th most points per game to tight ends this year. Taysom Hill, while he's not the conventional tight end play, there is nobody else on this list that can get you 10 plus carries with goal line work every week, that also gets targets and can also throw the football. So it doesn't feel good playing Taysom Hill. The dude's been on an absolute roll, and it's not going to be comfortable rostering him, but honestly, he deserves to have some consideration week in, week out. TJ Hawkinson, even though it's a quarterback carousel over in Minnesota, we do know Josh Dobbs has no problem at all targeting the tight end position, so it's how talented he is, and he's going to be a focal point of this offense, especially with no Justin Jefferson. I mean, yeah, $5,000, I think that's a pretty good price tag, even without Kirk Cousins. Dalton Schultz, massive game last week, 10 catches, 130 yards, got into the end zone for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and now draws the best matchup a tight end can ask for versus Cincinnati Bengals, who are currently allowing 16.3 points per game, 66 yards, and half a receiving touchdown. They just let Dalton Kincaid get 11 targets, 10 catches as well. So while I'm not expecting Schultz to get 30 fantasy points again, he definitely has upside here and what should be a good game script as they are 6.5 point dogs on the road. Evan Ingram, just heavily targeted in 6.5 catches per game, 7.5 targets, 23% target share. And we know the 49ers pass defense has not been that great this year, so it's a really nice price point for Evan Ingram. Then Trey McBride at $3,500. He gets a quarterback upgrade with Kyler Murray this week. And the tight end position in this Arizona offense has been heavily involved this season. I know he had a 14 target game recently. Now, it's not the same exact quarterback situation, but at this price point versus the Atlanta Falcons, that is 100% viable. I think he's a fine cash play if you need to save some money. And as for defenses, you guys know how I roll. We scroll to the bottom and we find the first viable defense implied team total wise. And no Giants, no Jaguars for me. Although with the win, the Jaguars might not be the worst play at $2,400, but at $2,500, just $100 more, I feel better with the Cardinals versus the Atlanta Falcons playing at home, 1.5 point dog. So it's pretty much a pick 'em there. At 22.5 implied team total, that's fine. The Bengals. The problem with the Bengals defense is that everyone's going to want this game to be a blowout, so you're not going to really want to play the Bengals defense. But it's not the worst contrarian play, especially if you're using Joe Mixon. I wouldn't hate that. But if you're not going cheap with those guys, I don't really see anybody else that looks super inviting to me. Maybe the Titans versus the Buccaneers, Buccaneers versus the Titans. A lot of people will probably try to play the Cowboys. My projections love the Cowboys this week, but it's just really hard for me to stomach rostering a defense at $4,500. Like, that's the difference from going like an Amon-Ra St. Brown to like a Chris Olave, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. All right, so let's knock this lineup out. We have 4 spots left and $17,700 to do it. Like I said, I want to double stack here, so Sam Laporta. I don't love the price point at $6,000 because I can get Trey McBride for $2,000 less, but for the sake of staying consistent with our roster construction we've done all season long, we'll go with Laporta. $4,000 left. Let's throw in a cheap defense. Cardinals were the first ones that looked halfway decent to me. I don't like the Cardinals defense, trust me. I like Bijan, and I don't mind some of the other Falcons pieces in large field tournaments. But they'll get the job done here for this lineup. And we have just under 5K left, so we could go more of a balanced route. So I do like Tyler Boyd a lot. I want at least another piece that Bengals offense, and I would like to get at least one pass catcher, especially with T. Higgins out. I mean, it just opens up more involvement for guys like Boyd, Trenton Irwin, and we'll see the status of Jamar Chase. We have $4,900 left. I'll be honest, I'm not really sure there's anybody I like at wide receiver at $4,900 because I know for sure there's not a running back. So we have guys like Christian Watson, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is not the worst play versus that Vikings defense, but man, he kind of screwed me over last week with that gooser. JSN here is at $4,100. You could always upgrade somewhere else. If we wanted to get a little bit more expensive here and fit in a mid-range wide receiver, I'm not 100% married to Tony Pollard, so you could go the Bijan Robinson route if you wanted. Then we'd have $6,200 left, and that can get you a guy like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Tyler Lockett, DeAndre Hopkins, who I love Hopkins this week. I know we didn't talk about him because I just didn't want to go over everybody, but great matchup versus the Buccaneers. So I think that's actually a really solid play. So this is not a bad looking lineup. We have Jared Goff double stacked with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Running back with Quentin Johnston. Feels ugly, but we got to find somebody. Then we have Bijan and Joe Mixon, which I prefer Pollard, but just for the build I wanted to fit here, I'm okay with it. Then we have Tyler Boyd. You get a piece of that Bengals pass tech just because T. Higgins is out. DeAndre Hopkins, last piece fit, but it's a heck of a last piece fit because I love him in this spot. Then we have the Cardinals defense because why not? And as per usual, I just want to show you guys who is populating the most as of right now on Friday evening. So a lot can change projection wise. I don't have any ownership projections up at this moment, but a lot will change by the time Sunday rolls around with injury news dropping. And obviously we have guys like Jamar Chase who are questionable to play, which could change the landscape of this slate. But as of right now, this is what we got. I have very minimal settings on. I throw in a little bit of randomness, so it's not the exact projections. And then I have just very minimal stacking enabled as well. So let's look at the builds here, some of the lineups, and see what guys are getting jammed in. So if we look at the usage tab here, yeah, the Cowboys defense is number one. I have them projected high. Me personally, there's just so much variance at the defense position. I would trim that way down personally. I would play some this week, but I just think they're going to be insanely popular. And at $4,500, I can get a wide receiver and just get me a random defense that hopefully gets me 6 points. And as long as the Cowboys don't score, I don't think we'll be dead in the water. But outside of that, Joe Mixon, Bijan Robinson, Noah Brown popping a ton, TJ Hawkinson, CMC, Joe Burrow, Rashad White, ETN. So pretty much all these guys we talked about. So I'm honestly not too surprised. It looks like Burrow, Brock Purdy, the most popular quarterbacks populating for me. If we go to the teams, lots of Bengals, lots of Jaguars, Dallas, probably mainly the defense, and Tony Pollard right there. But yeah, I'm not too surprised. Cincy versus Houston is going to be a very popular game this week. Jacksonville versus San Francisco. While you might think San Francisco was expensive because of the CMC price, honestly, not that hard just to fit in players from either of those teams. So I could see that being very popular as well. Arizona, Atlanta, Dallas, New York. So pretty much in agreement with the majority of the things I'm saying. So hopefully this will give you guys a good anticipation on who's going to be popular on this slate, because I can't imagine I'm too far off of other people's, and just based off projections and what players get popped in all the big sites optimizers, that's going to sway ownership, and it's probably going to be pretty similar to this.